How do you find a ghost? A man who plans every move, erases his past, and disappears into thin air. In 1971, a man named John List killed his entire family. He then wrote a long confession, walked out of his home, and simply vanished. For 18 years, it was as if he never existed. The case grew cold. Detectives had old photographs, but people change over time. Wrinkles appear, hair turns gray. The John List in the pictures was a young man. The man they were looking for would now be much older. There were no new clues and no new leads. It seemed this terrible mystery would never be solved. Then, someone had a brilliant idea. What if they could predict what John List looked like now? They decided to ask an artist for help. This was not a normal way to hunt for a fugitive. They needed someone who understood faces, time, and human nature. They needed a special kind of detective, one who worked with clay. A forensic sculptor was hired for the job. His task was to age a man he had never met. The artist studied every old photograph of John List he could find. He also learned about the man himself. John List was very proud and always wanted to look proper. The artist believed that part of him would never change. With his hands and his mind, the artist began to work. He shaped the clay, imagining how gravity and time would pull at the skin. He thought about the man's personality. He guessed that List would still wear the same style of glasses. Slowly, a new face emerged. It was a sculpture of an older man, a man who had been hiding for 18 years. This clay bust was their one new hope. But a clue is only useful if people see it. The investigators decided to show the sculpture to the entire country. They worked with a popular television show that helped find criminals. Millions of people tuned in and saw the artist's creation. They saw the face of the man who had vanished. Just 11 days later, the phone rang. A viewer from a different state had seen the show. The sculpture looked exactly like her quiet neighbor. This man had lived down the street for years. No one knew his real story. Police went to the house to investigate. The neighbor was John List. He was living a new life under a new name. The artist's sculpture was so accurate it led police right to his door. The ghost was caught. A case that was cold for nearly 2 decades was finally closed, not with a fingerprint, but with a work of art and a clever idea. It proved that justice can be found in the most unexpected ways. How do you find a ghost? What if someone you were looking for vanished, leaving no trace behind? For 18 years, one man was a complete mystery. The only thing police had was an old picture of a face that time had already changed. The answer to finding him wasn't in a file, it was in a block of clay. In 1971, a man named John List killed his entire family. Then he wrote a confession, a note explaining why. After that, he vanished. He walked out of his house and disappeared completely. The police searched everywhere, but John List was gone. Years went by. 1 year turned into 5, then 10, then almost 18 years. The case grew cold. The clues were old. The photos of John List showed a young man, but now he would be much older. How could anyone find a man whose face they no longer knew? He was like a ghost from the past. The police knew they had to try something new. The old ways were not working. They needed to see the man not as he was, but as he might be now. This called for a special kind of thinking, a mix of science and art. This new idea was called forensic sculpture. It's a special job where an artist helps the police. The artist takes old pictures and information about a person. Then they use clay to build a model of what that person's face might look like today. It's a way to make a new picture when there isn't one. They found the perfect person for the job, an artist named Frank Bender. He was more than just a sculptor. He tried to understand the people he was trying to find. He would think about their life, their habits, and how time would change them. He was a detective who used clay instead of a magnifying glass. Frank Bender studied the old photos of John List. He saw a man with a thin face and glasses, but he also thought about the life List had been living. For 18 years, he was hiding. A life of stress and secrets can change a person. Bender added weight to the face, made the hairline change, and imagined the new lines on the face of an older man. Slowly, a new face took shape in the clay. It was the face of an older, serious-looking man. It was a guess, a careful, educated guess. This sculpture was the police department's best new clue. It was their only hope to bring an old ghost back into the light. Now they had a face, but they needed the world to see it. The police decided to put the sculpture on a television show called America's Most Wanted. Millions of people watched this show. Maybe, just maybe, one of them would recognize the man made of clay. The show aired, and the story of John List was told to the nation. The camera focused on the sculpture, turning it slowly so everyone could see it from all sides. It was a quiet, powerful moment. A face from the past, updated for the present, was now in living rooms all across the country. Just 11 days later, the phone rang. A viewer was on the line. She told the police that the man in the sculpture looked exactly like her neighbor, a quiet man who had moved in a few years ago, a man who called himself Robert Clark. Police went to the house. They found the man the neighbor had described. At first, he said he was not John List, but the police had ways to be sure. They checked his fingerprints. The prints were a perfect match. After 18 years, the man who vanished was found. John List was brought to justice. The long, cold case was finally closed. It was solved not with a traditional clue, but with a work of art. The story shows us that sometimes the key to solving the hardest puzzles comes from a new idea, a creative spark, and the courage to see things differently. How do you find a man who has been a ghost for 18 years? In 1971, a man named John List did a terrible thing. He then vanished. He left a note, but no clues. He was gone. It happened in a quiet town. The man, John List, planned everything very carefully. After he hurt his entire family, he wrote a long confession. Then he walked away from his life. He disappeared completely. Police searched everywhere. They looked for John List for a long time, but he was like a shadow. The years went by. 1 year became 5 years. 5 years became 10, then 15. For 18 years, nobody knew where he was. The case grew cold. The police never gave up. They needed a new idea. The old photos of John List showed a young man, but now he would be much older. How could they show people what he might look like today? They decided to try something new. They called a forensic artist. This is a person who uses art to help solve mysteries. This artist's job was to guess what John List's face looked like after 18 years. The artist's name was Frank Bender. He was very good at his job. He did not just look at old pictures. He tried to think like John List. He thought about how hiding for so long might change a person. Frank Bender got to work with clay. He studied the shape of John List's old photos. He thought about how faces get wrinkles and how hair can turn gray. He carefully added details, piece by piece. He even thought about the kind of person John List was. He was a man who planned things, so the artist gave the clay head glasses that were not too fancy. He tried to show the life List might have lived. When the clay head was done, it looked like a real person. It showed an older man. It was the artist's best guess of what the ghost looked like now. This was their new clue. But a clue is only good if people see it. The police needed help. They decided to put the sculpture on a television show. This show helped find people who were missing. Millions of people watched it. One night, the story of John List was on TV. The host showed the old photos. Then, they showed the new clay head. They asked everyone watching to look closely. Did they know this man? Just 11 days later, the phone rang. A viewer had seen the show. The clay head looked just like a man she knew. He was her neighbor. He was quiet and lived a simple life under a new name. The police went to the address. They found the man from the TV show. It was John List. The artist's sculpture looked so much like him. After 18 years, the man who vanished was found. John List had to answer for what he did in 1971. The long search was over because of a new idea. It was not a footprint or a fingerprint that found him. It was a work of art. This story shows us that solving a puzzle takes more than just rules. It takes new ideas. A man made a face out of clay, and that clay face brought a ghost back into the light, finally closing a sad story.